This is your boy Conejotako speaking, still suffering through my thesis. I actually finished my tasks early today, so I was able to fire up the stream and read the episode live with my Spanish channel. But I know not everyone watches the streams, and some of you just want to know what I think about today's episode. Honestly, Chapter 4 was amazing and packed with references that I'm sure very few people are going to catch. Who would have thought I'd finally get to use all that side story knowledge that only I and a handful of others have read? So, if you want to understand today's episode in detail, stick around, or you're going to be left with a pretty bland understanding of what dropped today. But before we move on, I know I said I don't have time for shoutouts, but I at least want to give a shout out to the channel members who have been paying for the top tier membership for months and months, both my Spanish-speaking audience and my English-speaking crew. Alright, let's get started with the analysis of Arc 10, Episode 4. I know a lot of you like the part where Subaru talks about bringing locomotives to this world. It's not that I didn't like it, but I just feel it pales in comparison to the revelations that came later. Of course, I appreciate that bringing up the topic allowed for another mention of Vincent, whom I consider one of the best characters in the series. It's nice to see Subaru still keeping him in mind and thinking about him. After all, he spent 2 whole arcs by his side. Also, thanks to the locomotive talk, we got a cute reaction from Petrask, who felt offended when Subaru thought the train would be more useful for long distances. These are moments that don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but they're always good to have. But after that comes the most important part, and the reason I'm writing this. When Subaru decides to rest a bit by leaning on Betty's head, she and the boy start talking about the black sphere that contained Aldebaran. Finally, we have a mention of the consequences of Arc 9, an arc that many didn't like because of how it ended. But the most interesting thing is that Subaru repeats the words he said in the last arc. Now he will be someone who seeks, investigates, and deciphers the mysteries of the world of Lugunica. He feels there are things he must and needs to know. During the journey, the conversation turns serious as they analyze the black sphere that Subaru wears around his neck. Beatrice detects a trace of her mother, Echidna, on it, leading both of them to discuss the disturbing erasure of the Witch of Greed's history. That's where Biko mentions for the first time in the main story a magic called Dream Arts. This is a magic that, while just now being mentioned in the main novel, we've actually seen in action before without realizing it. The world Echidna manifested in Season 2 is a product of this spell. It's said that in this world, the user of Dream Arts can induce an idea in their targets and thus bend their spirits to their will. In fact, in the original canon of the web novels, the other witches seem to realize this. That's why when Subaru rejected Echidna's offer, they asked her why she guided Subaru to reject her if she had the means to make him accept. For a long time, we didn't know what they meant by saying Echidna could have made Subaru accept the contract until the information about the Dream Arts was revealed. It turns out Echidna is also a user of these unknown arts, and that's why the other witches wondered why she didn't simply use it to force Subaru to accept her offer. Although I should clarify that when rewriting this for the light novel, the author deleted the part where the witches hinted at this possibility, but that's another topic. However, Echidna isn't the only user of Dream Arts currently. In fact, she herself says there are 2 people more versed in that art than she is, adding that if these people set their minds to it, they could become powerful witches thanks to this power. So, who are these characters? Let me play the video that explains it. Did you know there's an elf looking for Subaru in the novel right now? A few years ago, there was a ReZero video game called Lim. In this game, there was an elf with 2 personalities, Shion and Lylac. One way or another, they both managed to leave the game's universe and cross over into the novel's universe. They don't remember much of what they did in the game, but they do remember that there was someone who helped them both get along, and that this person even taught them some English. They don't know it, of course, but in the game, they were helping the player, or rather, they were helping an alternate version of Subaru. So you can imagine their surprise when one day they mysteriously arrive in the novel's universe and hear someone, a person named Echidna, speaking English. They deduced that this person they just met must be connected to the one they can't remember. So they made a deal. They would join Echidna's traveling group in exchange for her eventually telling them everything she knows about that boy. Although she has already warned them that this foolish boy is an entity that not even she, the Witch of Knowledge, fully understands. All of this that I'm narrating occurs shortly after Season 2. We don't know what Echidna and this group are up to during the events of Aldebaran's betrayal. But recently, in a novel about Felt, it was revealed that a witch has just been reborn in the ever-snowy land of Gustako. This casual revelation is a reference to all the adventures Echidna's group has been having. Unfortunately for her, since she wanted to keep a low profile, It means her existence has already been noticed by that nation. Remember, I have more obscure ReZero facts right here on my channel. Since I made that video, new lore about Shion and Lylac has come out, but that's obviously not relevant right now because we're talking about Arc 10. However, I can tell you it's very likely the author plans to include both of them in the main novel soon. But I want you to know that when I say soon, it's a relative time. It could be in the next arc, or it could be in the final arc. I state this with confidence because we already have proof that when the author mentions a concept or drops indirect information about certain characters, it's because they're going to appear soon. For example, many of you here only met Yae in Arc 9, but in reality, if you reread the main novel, you'll see Yae was a character who was already being teased with small references since Arc 7. That's why it wasn't a surprise to me when she appeared in Arc 9. After all, her arrival was already being hinted at indirectly. Now, the fact that Arc 10 mentions the existence of dream arts gives me high expectations for the arrival of Shion and Lylac to the main canon. On top of that, Subaru and Betty reference how there aren't many users of this art left, which is again a reference to the elves' past. Anyway, my prediction is that they will appear in Arc 12, and I think that because it's the arc where I believe Echidna will return, and since the elves are with her, well, it's very likely they'll appear there too. Another interesting matter touched upon today was Subaru's suspicion regarding the witch's records being erased by someone who is likely the witch cult. He makes a connection and says he finds it strange how it seems like whenever there's an object related to the witch's legacy, they appear to claim it. This is true. In fact, the events of Season 3 weren't the only time the cult tried to get their hands on objects left by the witch. The oldest mention on record is that more than 10 years before Episode 1, Regulus attacked that place apparently looking for an object that belonged to a witch. Then, several years later in the Anastasia stories, it's revealed how Capella ordered one of her children to search for another of Echidna's objects. And finally, in the 3rd season, in the same place where there were 3 witch objects, another attack occurs. This makes Subaru suspect that the cult is trying to erase every legacy of the other witches. But it doesn't end here. When Subaru was continuing to talk about who could have given this order, it seems he thought of someone, and just when he was about to say it, Betty couldn't hold back and couldn't help but shut her damn mouth. And because she didn't keep her mouth shut, we didn't see Subaru's deduction about who this person could be. Personally, I think he was going to say Flugel. Subaru already knows that guy is a malevolent and calculating individual, someone who has no qualms about using girls for his plans. After all, it was he who condemned Shaula to 400 years of solitude, and much the same happened to Betty. Sure, I'm aware it hasn't been confirmed that Subaru knows what Amelia knows about Flugel, but I still want to make a prediction. My prediction is that in the future, when this topic is touched upon again, Subaru will say he suspected Flugel. But let's move on to the next section. Honestly, the part coming up isn't that interesting. They talk about how Rom receives them, and it's also mentioned how Rom is probably the last of his race, the race of giants. We know Rom hasn't seen another giant in a long time, and it's even made clear that Sekhmet exterminated the giants of this race, so it seems the legacy of these people will soon die with Rom. There's a little chat and remembrance of how Subaru met Rom and his granddaughter, but the most interesting part is Garfield, who shows a certain maturity, not just in terms of his power, but also in handling his emotions. Those of us who read the Wallachia arc know Garfield faced tough opponents in that part, and to defeat them, he had to accept the advice and strength of others. It seems these experiences made it so he didn't attack Reinhardt the second he saw him, so good for the kid. And just as the whole camp patted Subaru after the Aldebaran events, now Subaru asks the whole camp to pat Garfield as a reward. Then they inform Subaru about the events that happened in the capital, and Reinhardt and the protagonist agree to catch up in a scene that, unfortunately, we won't see. Yeah, I know there's a scene about the reed sword, but it's not an interesting scene for me because, well, it was a shock for me to learn it at the end of Arc 9, so now that info doesn't attract me as much. But I'll take this chance to put up a short I made about that sword, which I'm sure you'll find interesting. Did you know this scene hides a spoiler that took 13 years to be revealed? The Dragon Sword Reed is arguably the most powerful object in the ReZero universe, not just because it's indestructible or capable of rewriting reality when it strikes, but because it has a will of its own and can only be drawn against worthy opponents. Before Episode 1 of the anime, we knew Reinhardt had already unsheathed it 3 times. We don't know who the first 2 opponents were, but we do know the third, Cecilis Segmund, the strongest person in the neighboring country. The 4th time the sword is drawn would be in Season 3, right when he faces his grandmother, Teresia. But what matters right now is the fifth person it was used for, Subaru. I know you've probably heard this fact to death during the Arc 9 release, but I'm sure you haven't heard the little clues the author left about Subaru being qualified as worthy throughout these 13 years of history. The first clue is in episode 1 when Reinhard meets Subaru. There's a subtle gesture where he touches the sword, indicating it's ready to be drawn because it considers our protagonist worthy. The second clue comes from the Season 3. See, there was a dialogue cut from the anime that hinted at Subaru's worthiness. When Reinhard hands his sword to Subaru before fighting Regulus, Subaru says that if necessary, he will use the sword and charge at the Archbishop. The Sword Saint replies that even he couldn't draw it. Back then, we thought he said that because the sword viewed both Regulus and Subaru as unworthy. But now that we know Subaru was always considered worthy, the meaning changes. Reinhard actually used that specific phrasing because even though Subaru is worthy, he simply can't use the sword against someone who is unworthy. That's why he emphasized the words, even you. It's a shame the anime skipped this part, but there's another moment that changes completely in retrospect. I'm talking about the scene where Reinhard tells Regulus he isn't considered worthy of the blade. We see the man deemed unworthy complaining about the situation, while in the background, the man who is considered worthy is just laughing at it. Without a doubt, it's an interesting contrast, one that was planned over 10 years ago. Remember, I've started a series covering all of ReZero's cut content on my channel, so if you want to check it out, just click the video linked below. But that's been all for today. I hope you like this analysis I made while doing my thesis. Remember, I have more content on the channel, and if you like it, consider supporting the channel so I can keep bringing content about this. And if you can't, consider leaving a like and a comment. The platform loves that kind of nonsense. See ya!